This is insane HOA madness. It started as a rumor and ended as a case file. Karen banged her clipboard on the counter and screamed that I would pay a records fee for every question. "I am escalating this today, do you understand?" she yelled, her face red and her finger stabbing toward the laminated notice she had just printed. I stood there in the Boundary Oaks Records Compliance Association Management Office in Boulder, Colorado, trying to figure out how asking for 3-year-old meeting minutes had turned into a threat to fine me $200. My phone was recording in my hoodie pocket, and I could feel the storage warning creeping closer to full. I work as a school custodian, so I know everyone in this town, and I knew the woman behind the counter was not buying Virginia Williams's performance either. Virginia slammed a stack of certified mail slips onto the counter like she was dealing cards. "I have all day, and so does my fine meter," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. The slips were all addressed to me, all dated within the last week, all claiming different violations I had never received notice about. The management staffer, a young guy named Eric, glanced at me and then back at Virginia. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if he is requesting records under the governing documents, we cannot charge per question. We can charge for copies, but not for access." Virginia whipped around and glared at him. "He is not a member in good standing if he has open violations," she snapped. "We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works." That line hit me like cold water. I had heard it before. 3 years ago, my neighbor David had used those exact words when he tried to fight the HOA over a towing bill that made no sense. He lost. He sold his place 6 months later and left town without explaining why. I had always thought it was just bad luck. Now, standing in this office with Virginia holding a phone on speaker like it was some kind of compliance badge, and Eric looking like he wanted to vanish, I realized it was not luck. It was a pattern. I kept my voice calm. I am not refusing to comply. I am asking to see the records that show what I am being cited for. Virginia's smile was thin and sharp. "Then you can pay the records fee, $50 per request, and you just made 4 requests. Eric opened his mouth, then closed it. I could see him doing the math in his head, trying to figure out if he was allowed to contradict her. I pulled out my phone and opened the governing documents I had downloaded last night. Section 12, subsection C. Records access is a member right and cannot be conditioned on fee payment except for reproduction costs. I turned the screen toward Eric, not Virginia. He nodded slowly. Virginia's face went from red to purple. She snatched the clipboard back and scribbled something with a pen that looked like it might snap. "Fine. You want records? I will get you records. But you are going to wait. And while you wait, I am processing these violations." She gestured at the stack of slips. Eric looked at me, then at Virginia, then back at me. He stepped slightly to the side like he was trying to get out of the blast radius. "Ma'am, I can pull the files now if you want to wait a few minutes," he said to me, his voice careful. Virginia cut him off. "No. He can submit a written request and wait the statutory 10 business days like everyone else." I acted like I was backing down, because timing was the whole weapon. I nodded and stepped back from the counter. "All right, I will submit it in writing, but I am also noting that you just told staff to deny immediate access, and I have that on record." Virginia froze for half a second, then recovered. "You are not allowed to record in this office," she said. I smiled. Colorado is a one-party consent state, and I am a party to this conversation. Eric's eyes went wide. Virginia turned on him. "Why are you still standing there? Get back to work." He did not move. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I think we should probably just give him the files." Virginia spun back to me. "You think you are clever, do not you? You think you can just waltz in here and demand things and we will roll over? I have been on this board for 6 years, and I have seen people like you come and go. You are already in a dispute with the management company, and now you are stacking complaints on top of it? Good luck." She grabbed her clipboard and walked out of the office, leaving Eric standing there looking like he had just watched a car crash. I leaned on the counter. "Can you pull the files?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, give me 5 minutes. Do not go anywhere." While Eric disappeared into the back, I checked my phone storage, 87% full. I had maybe 2 more hours of recording space before I would have to offload footage, and I was already juggling 3 clips from the last 2 weeks. This whole thing had started 10 days ago when a tow truck showed up at my house at 6 in the morning with a driver who called me by name. I had never met him. He said my car was illegally parked in my own driveway because the permit sticker was expired. I told him I never got a permit sticker in the first place. He shrugged and said Virginia told him to tow it anyway. I paid the $200 release fee on the spot because I had to get to work, but the whole thing felt wrong. That night, I went through my old emails and found the welcome packet from when I moved into Boundary Oaks 2 years ago. No mention of permit stickers. I searched the governing documents. No mention of permit stickers. I checked the neighborhood group chat, and 3 people immediately messaged me privately saying they got towed the same way last year. One of them sent me a doorbell camera clip showing Virginia walking up their driveway at 2 in the morning with a flashlight, taking photos of their car. When I asked why they did not fight it, they said the management company told them their files were too thick and they should just pay. I started asking questions. I filed a complaint with the board asking for the rule citation that required permit stickers. Virginia responded within an hour with a link to a portal upload page and a deadline. Submit all supporting documents within 72 hours or the complaint would be dismissed. I uploaded a signed statement and a copy of my welcome packet. The upload failed 3 times. When I finally got it through, I got an auto reply saying my submission was received but under review for completeness. 2 days later, I got a notice saying my complaint was dismissed for failure to provide documentation. The attachment was blank. That was when I decided to go analog. I printed everything. I bought a 3-ring binder and started building a timeline. I labeled every page with dates and cross-references. I tagged sections with color-coded tabs. I went to the county clerk and pulled the recorded HOA documents going back 5 years. I found something interesting. 3 years ago, the board had amended the rules to add a section about vehicle compliance, but the amendment never mentioned permit stickers. The permit sticker policy appeared 6 months later in a newsletter, but it was listed as a reminder, not a new rule. No vote. No notice. Just a line in the newsletter saying all residents were required to display current permit stickers obtained from the management office. I pulled the board meeting minutes from that same time period. They were a mess. Half the meetings had no minutes on file. The ones that did exist were bare-bones summaries with no motions recorded, no vote counts, no attachments. I found one set of minutes dated March 15, 3 years ago, that referenced a vehicle enforcement discussion, but the summary just said discussion tabled pending legal review, no follow-up in any later minutes. I cross-checked the newsletter archive and found the permit sticker reminder dated September 22 of that same year. 6 months later, no meeting minutes in between that mentioned vehicles at all. I took the binder to a neighbor who had helped me move in, a retired paralegal named Carla. She was the one who sent me the doorbell footage of Virginia. She looked through my timeline and shook her head. "This is selective enforcement," she said. If the permit sticker policy was never properly adopted, every tow based on it is invalid. You need to find out who approved the towing contract and whether they are getting kickbacks. I asked her how I would even start looking for that. She grinned. "You ask for the financial records. If they are hiding something, they will fight you. If they are not, they will hand them over." So I submitted a records request, balance sheets, vendor contracts, towing invoices, and board correspondence for the last 4 years. I kept it narrow enough to be reasonable, but wide enough to catch anything fishy. I submitted it in writing, by email, and by certified mail, all on the same day. I got 3 different responses. The email bounced. The portal submission got an auto reply saying it was under review. The certified mail got signed for by Virginia herself. 2 days later, I got a letter saying my request was denied because I had outstanding violations and was not a member in good standing. That was what brought me to the management office. I wanted to force the issue in person, on camera, with a witness. And it worked. Eric came back out with a file box and set it on the counter. "Okay, so, here is the thing," he said, keeping his voice low. "I pulled everything you asked for that I am allowed to give you without board approval. Virginia is going to lose her mind when she finds out, but technically you are right. You have a right to access." He slid the box toward me. "But I am going to tell you right now, some of this stuff is not going to make sense. There are gaps. I nodded. I figured. Can I take pictures? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, just do not take the originals. I spent the next hour photographing every page, bank statements with line items for towing vendor payments but no corresponding invoices, board meeting minutes with vote counts that did not match the number of board members listed in the governing documents, emails between Virginia and the tow company with subject lines like updated schedule and revised fee structure, but the email bodies were missing. And then I found it. A vendor agreement signed 3 years ago, right around the time David got towed, with a commission structure that paid the HOA a percentage of every tow fee collected. I took a picture of the signature page, Virginia Williams, vendor coordinator. I took a picture of the commission clause. I took a picture of the email header showing her correspondence with the tow company. Then I packed up my binder and thanked Eric. He looked pale. If she asks, I gave you what you are entitled to under the governing documents, he said. I nodded. You did the right thing. He did not look convinced. I walked out into the parking lot and checked my phone. 92% storage. I needed to back up everything tonight. I got in my car and started driving home, running through the next steps in my head. I had proof of a financial relationship between Virginia and the tow vendor. I had proof the permit sticker policy was never properly adopted. I had proof of missing minutes and incomplete records. What I did not have yet was proof that Virginia had used the scheme to target specific people. That was the missing piece. That was what would connect this to David and to me and to whoever else got caught in the same trap. I was 2 blocks from home when I saw the tow truck in my driveway. Same company, different driver. He was hooking up my car. I pulled over and jumped out. Hey, what are you doing? The driver did not even look up. Vehicle in violation of HOA parking policy. I walked up and stood between him and my car. I paid the fee last week. This is my driveway. This is my property. He finally looked at me, not according to the work order I got. He pulled out a printed sheet and handed it to me. It was dated today, signed by Virginia, citing my car for obstructing a fire lane. My driveway is not a fire lane. I took a picture of the work order with my phone. The driver shrugged. Take it up with the HOA. I am just doing my job. I pulled out my phone and called the non-emergency police line. I told the dispatcher I had a tow truck attempting to remove my vehicle from my private property without my consent, and I believed it was part of an HOA dispute. She said she would send an officer. The driver heard that and stopped working. He stepped back and pulled out his own phone. Yeah, I got a situation here, he said into it. Homeowner is refusing to comply. He listened for a second, then looked at me. My boss says if you do not move, we are leaving the truck here and charging you a standby fee. I smiled. Tell your boss I will see him in court. 5 minutes later, a Boulder PD patrol car pulled up. The officer got out and asked what was going on. I explained the situation, showed him the work order, showed him my previous tow receipt, and showed him the section of the governing documents that said driveways were private property and not subject to towing without owner consent. The driver tried to argue that the HOA had authorized it, but the officer cut him off. Unless you have a court order or a lien, you cannot tow a vehicle off private property without the owner's consent, he said. The driver called his boss again. After a tense 2-minute conversation, he unhooked my car and left. The officer turned to me. You might want to document all this and file a formal complaint with the HOA, he said. This feels like harassment. I nodded. I am working on it. He gave me his card and told me to call if it happened again. After he left, I stood in my driveway staring at the work order. Virginia had signed it 4 hours ago, right after I left the management office. This was retaliation. This was her trying to bury me before I could use what I found. I went inside and plugged in my phone to offload the footage. While it transferred, I opened my laptop and started drafting an email to the entire board. I attached pictures of the vendor agreement, the missing minutes, the commission structure, and the 2 work orders showing the same vehicle towed twice in 2 weeks for different alleged violations. I wrote a timeline of events starting with David 3 years ago and ending with the tow truck in my driveway 2 hours ago. I wrote a list of questions. Who authorized the vendor agreement? Who approved the commission structure? Why were meeting minutes missing? Who decided the permit sticker policy was enforceable? And I ended with a single line: I am requesting an emergency board meeting to address vendor coordinator misconduct, and I am copying all homeowners on this email so the board is aware this is not a private dispute. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe. I have got a lot more HOA chaos coming your way. I hit send at 8 p.m. By 8:15, my phone was ringing. It was a board member I had never spoken to, a guy named Greg, who lived on the other side of the neighborhood. He sounded nervous. Look, I just got your email, and I want you to know I had no idea about any of this. I have been asking Virginia for financials for months, and she keeps saying they are being audited. I did not know there was a commission structure with the tow company. I asked him if he would support an emergency meeting. He hesitated. I will support a meeting, but I am going to be honest with you. Virginia has 3 votes locked down. She has been running this board for years, and most of the members do not want to rock the boat. If you want this to go anywhere, you need to bring enough evidence that they cannot ignore it. I told him I had evidence. He sighed. Then you better be ready for her to fight dirty. She has already been telling people you are a problem homeowner and that you are trying to avoid paying legitimate fines. She has been leaking screenshots of your violation notices to the neighborhood group chat. I felt my stomach drop. What screenshots? He sent me a picture. It was a PDF of a violation notice with my name on it, dated 2 months ago, citing me for exterior paint color non-compliance. I had never seen it before. I had never received it. And my house was the same color it had been when I bought it 2 years ago, which meant it was compliant when the previous owner sold it. I asked Greg if he believed I had received that notice. He paused. Honestly? No. I have seen Virginia backdate stuff before. Last year she tried to fine someone for a fence that was installed before the rule was even written. The homeowner fought it and she dropped it, but only after she made their life hell for 6 months. I asked him why he stayed on the board if he knew she was doing this. He laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Because if I quit, she will have 4 votes locked down instead of 3. At least this way I can slow her down. I thanked him and hung up. Then I opened the neighborhood group chat and scrolled back. Sure enough, Virginia had posted the violation notice screenshot with a comment. Reminder that all homeowners are required to maintain exterior paint in accordance with the approved color palette. Repeated violations will result in fines and liens. Several people had reacted with thumbs up. One person had commented asking where to find the approved color palette. Virginia had responded with a link to a PDF on the HOA website. I clicked the link. It was a dead link. The file did not exist. I took a screenshot of the dead link and added it to my evidence folder. Then I went back to the vendor agreement and looked closer at the commission structure. It was not just a flat percentage, it was tiered. The more tows the company completed in a month, the higher the percentage the HOA received. And there was a clause that said the vendor coordinator was responsible for identifying non-compliant vehicles and issuing work orders. Virginia was not just enforcing the rules, she was hunting for violations to hit a quota. I pulled up the towing invoices Eric had let me photograph. Over the last 3 years, the HOA had collected nearly $40,000 in tow commissions. The invoices showed a spike every quarter, right before board meetings. I cross-referenced the board meeting dates with the invoice dates. Every single quarter, Virginia had issued a batch of tow orders in the 2 weeks leading up to the meeting. And every single meeting, the financials showed a line item for towing revenue that got rolled into the general fund with no explanation of how it was being used. I started building a second timeline. This one tracked every tow over 3 years, cross-referenced with board meeting dates, financial reports, and missing minutes. A pattern emerged. The quarters with the most tows were also the quarters with the least documentation. The minutes were either missing entirely or summarized in a way that made it impossible to tell what had been discussed. And in every case, the towing revenue was listed as miscellaneous income with no breakdown. I sent the new timeline to Greg with a note, "This is what I am bringing to the meeting." He replied within minutes, "Holy shit, this is fraud. You need to loop in the HOA attorney." I told him I did not think the HOA attorney would help me. He sent back a single line. The attorney sent an email last month warning the board that Virginia was creating liability and she kept going anyway. I will forward it to you. The email landed in my inbox 30 seconds later. It was from the HOA's legal counsel, a firm in Denver, addressed to the entire board. The subject line was Potential Liability Vendor Relationships. The body was blunt. This firm has been asked to review the current vendor agreement with XYZ Towing, and we have identified several clauses that may expose the association to claims of self-dealing and improper financial benefit. We recommend immediate suspension of the commission structure and a third-party audit of all towing-related revenue. Failure to act on this advice may result in personal liability for board members who vote to continue the arrangement. The email was dated 6 weeks ago. I checked the board meeting minutes from the month after the email was sent. No mention of the attorney's warning, no mention of an audit, no mention of the vendor agreement at all. Instead, the minutes showed a vote to renew the towing contract for another year. The vote was 4-1. Greg was the only no vote. I replied to Greg, "Did anyone ever respond to the attorney?" He wrote back, "Virginia told us the attorney was being overly cautious and that the contract was standard for HOAs in Colorado. 2 board members believed her. The other one does not read emails. I asked him what he needed from me to force a vote. He said, bring the timeline, the financials, the attorney email, and at least 3 homeowners who will speak on record about being targeted. If you can do that, I can force a special meeting. The board president does not want to be sued, and if you make it clear this is heading toward litigation, he will fold." I spent the next 2 days reaching out to every homeowner I could find who had been towed in the last 3 years. Most did not want to get involved. A few were still angry but did not think it was worth the fight. One couple had already moved out of the neighborhood. But I found 3 people who were willing to speak. Carla, the retired paralegal who had helped me with the initial research, a guy named Tom who got towed twice in 1 month for the same alleged violation, and a woman named Jessica whose doorbell camera had caught Virginia taking pictures of her car at NIG HT. Carla was the most fired up. She pulled her own records and found that her tow had been ordered the same day she filed a complaint about a drainage issue the HOA was ignoring. Tom had been towed right after he asked questions about the reserve fund at a board meeting. Jessica had been towed a week after she posted in the group chat asking why board meetings were not being recorded. Every single one of them had been told their files were too thick and they should just pay. I compiled all of it into a single packet: the vendor agreement, the commission structure, the attorney warning, the missing minutes, the financial timeline, the towing invoices, the retaliation pattern, and signed statements from Carla, Tom, and Jessica. I made 5 copies and put them in 5 identical binders. Then I sent a formal demand to the board president. I am requesting an emergency special meeting under the governing documents to address vendor coordinator misconduct, financial irregularities, and retaliation against homeowners exercising their rights. I am providing notice that I will be represented by counsel if this matter is not resolved at the meeting. I am also providing notice that I will be sharing this packet with all homeowners in the association and filing a complaint with the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies if the board fails to act. The board president called me that night. His name was Alan and he sounded exhausted. "Look, I do not want this to turn into a legal fight," he said. "What do you want?" I told him I wanted 3 things: an independent audit of the towing contract and all related revenue, a vote to terminate the vendor agreement, and Virginia removed from any role that involved vendor management or enforcement. He was quiet for a long time. "I can probably get you the audit," he said. "The vote is going to be harder. Virginia has support on this board and she is going to fight." I told him that was fine. I just wanted it on the record. He scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. I got the notice by email the next morning along with a passive-aggressive note from Virginia. All homeowners wishing to speak must submit a written request 48 hours in advance and are limited to 3 minutes. I replied all with a copy of the governing documents. Section 9, subsection F. Homeowners may speak on any matter related to association business without prior notice and without time limits except as imposed by the presiding officer for reasons of order. The board president may not prohibit speech on matters included in the published agenda. Virginia did not respond. The night before the meeting, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of my car in my driveway with a red circle drawn around the license plate. The caption said, "Expired registration. Tow order submitted." I checked my registration. It was valid for another 8 months. I took a screenshot of the text, the registration, and my car with a timestamp, and I added it to the packet. Then I replied, "See you at the meeting." Tuesday came. I showed up 30 minutes early with my binder, my phone fully charged, and a voice recorder as backup. Carla, Tom, and Jessica were already there, sitting in the front row. Greg gave me a nod from the board table. Virginia was standing near the door with her clipboard and her stack of certified mail slips, talking to 2 other board members. When she saw me, her expression went cold. She walked over and stood directly in my path. "You are not allowed to record this meeting," she said. I smiled. "Colorado Sunshine Law says otherwise." She turned to Alan, who was setting up a laptop at the head table. "Is he allowed to record?" Alan looked uncomfortable. "Yes, it is a public meeting. Open meetings laws apply." Virginia's face went red, but she stepped aside. I sat down next to Carla and pulled out my binder. More people started filtering in. By 7 p.m., there were about 20 homeowners in the room, which was a huge turnout for a special meeting. Alan called the meeting to order and read the agenda. Discussion and possible action regarding vendor management policies and financial oversight. He looked at me. "You requested this meeting. Do you want to present?" I stood up and walked to the front. I opened my binder and started with the timeline. 3 years ago, a homeowner named David was towed under a permit sticker policy that was never properly adopted. He fought it, he lost, and he moved out of the neighborhood. Since then, at least 15 homeowners have been towed under the same policy. All of them were told the policy was mandatory. None of them were shown the rule adoption vote because no vote exists. I pulled out the newsletter and the missing minutes and held them up. This policy was introduced in a newsletter 6 months after the only board meeting that discussed vehicle enforcement. That meeting tabled the discussion, pending legal review. No follow-up meeting minutes exist. Virginia stood up. "That is not true. The policy was approved in executive session." I turned to her. "Executive sessions are for litigation, personnel, and contracts. Rule adoptions require open meetings and recorded votes." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Alan cleared his throat. "Do you have proof the policy was not adopted?" I pulled out the county clerk documents showing the recorded rule amendments. The only vehicle-related amendment was adopted 5 years ago, and it does not mention permit stickers. If the board approved this policy in executive session, there should be minutes and a resolution on file. I am requesting the board produce those records now. Alan looked at Virginia. She looked at the other board members. One of them, a guy named Scott, shrugged. "I have never seen minutes from an executive session about parking." Virginia glared at him. "We do not keep detailed minutes of executive sessions," she said. "That is normal." I nodded. "That is true." "But you do keep resolutions. If the board voted to adopt a new rule, there should be a resolution signed by the board and recorded with the county." I checked. There is not one. I kept going. "The second issue is financial. The HOA has a vendor agreement with XYZ Towing that includes a commission structure. Every time a car is towed, the HOA gets a percentage of the fee. Over the last 3 years, the HOA has collected nearly $40,000 in towing commissions." I pulled out the vendor agreement and handed copies to each board member. The agreement was signed by Virginia Williams in her role as vendor coordinator. The commission structure is tiered, which means the more tows that happen, the more money the HOA makes. And the agreement specifically gives the vendor coordinator the authority to issue work orders. Alan stared at the paper. "I did not know about this," he said. He looked at the other board members. "Did any of you know about this?" Greg shook his head. "I have been asking for vendor contracts for a year." Scott looked pale. "No." "When was this signed?" I pointed to the signature line. 3 years ago. Right around the time the permit sticker policy first appeared. Virginia crossed her arms. "There is nothing improper about that agreement. Lots of HOAs have commission agreements with vendors." I nodded. "That might be true. But your own attorney sent you an email 6 weeks ago saying this agreement creates liability and recommending an immediate audit." I pulled out the attorney email and handed copies to the board. Alan read it and his face went gray. Why did I not see this email? Greg spoke up. You were copied. We all were. Virginia told us the attorney was being overly cautious. Alan turned to Virginia. You told us that? She did not answer. He looked back at the email. This says failure to act may result in personal liability for board members. You told us this was not a problem. She finally spoke, her voice tight. I was protecting the association from unnecessary legal fees. The attorney was trying to scare us into paying for an audit we did not need. I pulled out the financial timeline. Here is the third issue. Every quarter for the last 3 years, there has been a spike in towing activity in the 2 weeks before a board meeting. Every single time, the towing revenue gets listed as miscellaneous income with no breakdown. And in every case, the board meeting minutes from that quarter are either missing or incomplete. I laid out the chart on the table. This is not random. This is a pattern. Carla stood up. I was towed the same day I filed a complaint about a drainage issue. Tom stood up. I was towed twice in 1 month right after I asked about the reserve fund. Jessica stood up. I was towed a week after I asked why meetings were not being recorded. And I have doorbell footage of Virginia taking pictures of my car at night. She played the clip on her phone. The room went silent. You could see Virginia's face clearly in the video, lit by the porch light, holding her phone up and photographing Jessica's car from 3 different angles. Virginia stood up, her voice shaking. This is a coordinated attack. These people are lying. They are trying to avoid paying legitimate fines. I pulled out the fake violation notice she had posted in the group chat. Is this a legitimate fine? I never received this notice. My house has been the same color since I bought it, which means it was compliant when the previous owner sold it. And the link you posted to the approved color palette is dead. So either you backdated this notice or you are enforcing a rule that does not exist. She stared at me, her mouth open. I kept going, and this morning I got a text from an unknown number with a picture of my car and a threat to tow it for expired registration. My registration is valid for another 8 months. I held up my phone showing the text and the registration side by side. Alan stood up. This meeting is out of order. We need to take a recess. Virginia cut him off. No. I am not going to sit here and be accused of fraud by a homeowner who has been in violation since day one. She turned to me. You want to talk about evidence? Let's talk about your thick file. I have documented every single one of your violations. You have repeatedly refused to comply. You have harassed staff. And now you are trying to manipulate this board with fake timelines and out-of-context emails. I acted like I was backing down because timing was the whole weapon. I let her finish. Then I pulled out the last piece of evidence. I had been holding it because I wanted her to commit fully to her lie. This is an email from XYZ Towing, dated 2 months ago, responding to a request I made under the Colorado Open Records Act. I read it out loud. Quote, per your request, we have reviewed our records for work orders issued under the Boundary Oaks account. We confirm that on April 7th of this year, we received a work order from Virginia Williams to change the date on invoice number 447 from March 31st to April 3rd. We complied with this request as the vendor coordinator indicated it was necessary to match board meeting financials. End quote. The room exploded. People started shouting questions. Alan banged his hand on the table. Order! Everyone sit down! Virginia was frozen, her face white. I kept talking. Invoice 447 was Tom's second tow, the one that happened a week after his first tow. The original date was March 31st, which was the same day Tom filed a formal complaint about the first tow. Virginia had the date changed, so it looked like the second tow happened after the complaint was resolved, not while it was still pending. That is retaliation. That is fraud. And that is evidence of a pattern. Greg stood up. I move that we suspend Virginia Williams from all vendor-related duties immediately and initiate an independent audit of the towing contract and all related financials. Scott seconded it. Alan looked at Virginia. Do you have anything to say? She did not answer. She grabbed her clipboard and walked out of the room. The door slammed behind her. Alan called for a vote. It passed 4-0 with 1 abstention. The meeting continued for another hour. The board voted to terminate the vendor agreement with XYZ Towing effective immediately, to require written notice and a cure checklist for all future violations, and to implement a requirement that board meetings record audio officially so minutes cannot be rewritten. They also voted to refer the matter to the HOA attorney for a full legal review and to send a complaint to the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies regarding Virginia's conduct. Alan pulled me aside after the meeting. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have been paying closer attention." I told him I appreciated that, but what I really wanted was to make sure this did not happen to anyone else. He nodded. "We are going to fix this. I am also going to recommend that the board create a records access policy so homeowners do not have to fight for basic documents." I shook his hand and left. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the board. The independent audit had found evidence of over $60,000 in towing revenue that had been improperly categorized over 4 years. The auditor recommended that the HOA refund all towing fees collected under the permit sticker policy and terminate the vendor relationship tied to the abuse. The board voted unanimously to accept the recommendations. Virginia Williams was removed from her vendor coordinator role immediately and resigned from the board the same day. The refund checks went out a month later. I got $200 back. Carla got $400. Tom got $600. Jessica got $300. David, my old neighbor, got $800 mailed to his new address in Wyoming. The neighborhood group chat lit up with people posting pictures of their refund checks and thanking everyone who had spoken up at the meeting. The best part came 6 weeks later. The new board called a special meeting to review the governing documents and propose amendments. One of the amendments was a whistleblower protection policy that prohibited retaliation against homeowners who filed complaints or requested records. Another was a requirement that all vendor agreements be approved by a majority vote of the full board and posted publicly within 30 days. And the third was a ban on commission-based agreements with any vendor that provided enforcement-related services. Greg called me the night before the vote. "You did it," he said. "You actually fixed the system." I told him it was not just me. It was Carla and Tom and Jessica and everyone else who got tired of being pushed around. He laughed. "Yeah, but you were the one who built the case. You were the one who stood up there and made them look at the evidence. That takes guts." I thanked him and hung up. The amendments passed unanimously. The new rules went into effect 30 days later. Virginia moved out of the neighborhood 2 months after that. I heard she bought a condo in a building with no HOA. I ran into Eric, the management office staffer, at a coffee shop a few weeks later. He told me the management company had implemented new training for all staff about records access and homeowner rights. He also told me that 3 other HOAs in Boulder had reached out asking for copies of the new policies Boundary Oaks had adopted. I still live in the neighborhood. My car has never been towed again. I still keep the binder in my closet just in case. And every time I see a new homeowner move in, I make a point to introduce myself and tell them they have rights. I tell them to ask questions. I tell them to keep records. And I tell them that if something does not make sense, it is probably because someone is trying to hide something. A few months ago, I got a message from someone in a different HOA in Denver. They had found my story in a forum post someone had shared, and they wanted advice. Their HOA was doing the same thing: selective enforcement, missing minutes, backdated notices. I sent them a copy of my timeline template and a list of the questions to ask. I told them to get everything in writing, to bring witnesses, and to never back down if they knew they were right. They messaged me back a month later saying they had forced an audit and caught their board treasurer embezzling reserve funds. They said my advice had saved them. I think about David sometimes. I wonder if he knows that the thing that happened to him 3 years ago was not his fault. I wonder if he knows that we found the proof and we fixed it. I reached out to him once, sent him an email through an old address I found in the county records. I told him what had happened and I apologized for not seeing it sooner. He never wrote back. I do not blame him. Some fights take too much out of you, and sometimes moving on is the only way to heal. But I am glad I fought. I am glad I asked questions. I am glad I built the case and I stood up in that meeting and I made them look at the evidence. Because the truth is, HOAs only get away with this stuff when people are too tired or too scared to fight back. And the moment you decide you are not going to be quiet, the moment you decide you are going to document everything and build the case and force them to answer, that is the moment the power shifts. I am not saying it is easy. I am not saying it does not cost you time and energy and sleep, but I am saying it is worth it. Because when you win, you do not just win for yourself. You win for everyone who got pushed around before you, and you win for everyone who comes after. You change the system. You make it harder for the next Karen to pull the same scheme, and you prove that homeowners have power when they use it. The neighborhood is different now. People pay attention at board meetings. People ask questions. People request records. And when someone new moves in and gets a weird notice or a surprise fine, 3 or 4 neighbors will show up at their door with copies of the governing documents and a reminder that they do not have to just pay and move on. We have built a culture where accountability is not optional. And that is the real win. I still see Greg at the mailbox sometimes. He is still on the board, still fighting the good fight. He told me last week that they are working on a proposal to require all board members to take a governance training course before they can vote on enforcement issues. He said it is because of what happened with Virginia, because they never want to let someone weaponize the rules like that again. I told him I thought that was a great idea. He grinned and said, you should run for the board. I laughed and told him I had done my time. He said, fair enough. But if you ever change your mind, you have got my vote. I do not think I will run. I like being the guy who holds them accountable from the outside. I like being the guy who keeps the binder and asks the hard questions and reminds people that the rules apply to everyone, including the people who enforce them. That is my role. That is what I am good at. And honestly, after everything that happened, I think the neighborhood needs someone like that more than they need another board member. The final piece of the story came 6 months after the meeting. I got a letter from the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies. They had investigated the complaint about Virginia and the towing scheme. They found evidence of multiple violations of the HOA statutes, including improper financial benefit, retaliation, and failure to maintain accurate records. They issued a formal reprimand and a fine. The letter said that because the HOA had already taken corrective action and implemented new policies, no further penalties would be imposed. But it also said that the findings would remain on file and could be used as evidence in any future complaints. I made a copy of the letter and added it to the binder. Then I posted a redacted version in the neighborhood group chat with a note, "This is what happens when homeowners stand up for their rights." The response was overwhelming. People thanked me. People shared their own stories. People said they felt safer knowing that the system could be held accountable. And a few people said they were going to start paying closer attention to what their own HOAs were doing. That is the part that makes it all worth it. Not the refund check, not the apology from the board president, not even the satisfaction of watching Virginia pack up and leave. It is the ripple effect. It is knowing that other people saw what happened and decided they were not going to take it anymore. It is knowing that the fight I fought made it easier for someone else to fight theirs. That is the real victory. I was at the hardware store a few months ago loading bags of mulch into my car when I saw Virginia. She was standing by the entrance talking to someone I did not recognize. For a second, I thought about just ignoring her and walking past, but then she saw me. Our eyes met. She did not say anything. She just turned and walked in the other direction, and I realized that was closure enough. I do not need an apology. I do not need her to admit she was wrong. I do not need anything from her at all, because the truth is already out there. The records are public. The audit is done. The policies are changed, and everyone in that neighborhood knows what she did. She has to live with that. I get to live with the fact that I stood up and I fought back and I won. So if you are reading this and you are dealing with an HOA that is pulling the same kind of garbage, here is my advice. Document everything. Get it in writing. Take pictures. Record conversations if your state allows it. Build the timeline. Find the pattern. And do not be afraid to ask the hard questions, because the people who do not want you asking questions are usually the people who have something to hide. And if you are scared, if you think it is too much work or too much risk, just remember this. They are counting on you to be scared. They are counting on you to give up. They are counting on you to just pay the fine and move on. The moment you decide you are not going to do that, the moment you decide you are going to fight, you have already shifted the power, because they do not have an answer for someone who refuses to back down. Stay safe, and I will catch you in the next one.